I grew up on video games, so when an opportunity to experience a new game in 16-bit graphics comes up, then yes, I'd love to do it. I accept it. And the thing is, I also accept, why not experience my childhood in an analog game? Heroes Crossing has players as shopkeepers, buying, producing, and selling to heroes, traveling through our town looking for merch. This is a 2 to 4 player board game playing best with 4 for gameplay, interaction, and can be played in an hour or a little more. This incorporates dice rolling, tile placement, and bidding, all being used to create Heroes Crossing. Collect as many victory points as you can before the last hero enters town.
Now, since this is a relatively long game, I'm going to do a super rough setup and just kind of explain the way the game plays. I'll be dictating this with one player, so bear with it. Flow of the game's pretty easy. Just go ahead and draw an action deck, and what's going to happen here is you're going to see each row have 2 options, and you're going to choose which option you want to go to using a dice in order to use that option. Now, again, remember, you are a town building opportunities for these heroes here, whether it be swords, mage, apothecary, whatever. They're coming into your town, so you got to make sure you are ahead of the game. This isn't no Monopoly. You all out here doing your free market stuff. Anyways, so what are these actions? You have bid, which after you've rolled all your resource dice, this is literally their numbers for that round. So bid. So you'll be bidding on a new city or a new piece of the town to go into your town, okay? And really quickly, how the game's going to work is, smithies are going to be able to create, as you see here in this symbol, and then selling happens in the shop. So I can definitely build, right? So, like for example, if I were to build a resource in the apothecary, I'd have to move it to the shop, which is one of the move actions. And to move it, you count based off the dice roll. Like let's just use 4 for example. It'd be 1, 2, 3, right? But in this case, I just have to go down. And since this is a special tile, it's a free tile. I actually don't have to spend anything to go there. So that's like a free, that's like 1 move right there. So I still have 3 extra movements. So if I had extra resource in there, I could probably move them all down there. Just an example of how that works. So bidding would allow you to buy a new shop to put into your city. Now knowing the rules of like how your city works, you'd know where to place it. You can't place next to other shops, so you need these land tiles to go in between. But yeah, so let's say we're bidding right now. So I do want to get a shop in here, but I also need, a mage council. So I'm going to put my mage council there because I'm going to be bidding on this. I'll put my little character symbol there. So I'm bidding a 4. Same way that you're bidding for this, you do the same thing with bidding for heroes to come into town. Now, let's say I was actually already building some resources and I had some resources in the shop. I'd probably want to get a monk. So I'd place my die here to open him up to buying resources from me. Now I could also play in the wild section another dice, and if both dice are fulfilled, he'd come into my shop and I'd be able to use his ability. But as long as there's 1 dice on there, I can give him resources. If both dice are in there, I can give him multiple resources, and that's just how that goes. Move. I've shown you earlier how to do move. You're just literally taking resources and moving them to the shop. Modifiers are pretty self-explanatory. They add a +1 to your rolls. So like this would now be a 2 with a 3. And how that would work is, let's say I choose that as an action. I'd take my die and be like, okay, so this is below 1 through 3. So I'd get 2 modifiers. If I use this dice instead, it's above 4. So I only get 1 modifier. So different levels of dice make the difference. Now, as far as producing goes, that just doesn't really matter about the number on the dice. You're just using the dice as an like, let's say as a resource to build. This is a level 1, so the resource is going to be 1. Now, here's a little addition to it. The dice is actually above 4, so it builds an additional resource for me. So anything above 4 will build that additional resource. And we have this graveyard here. You're supposed to be putting used resources into the graveyard, or use dice resources into the graveyard. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, actually, I'm going to leave this here just for example, just to remind you that 4 gave me that additional. Now, expel and spy are different. You could use the spy action to use any resource die and move a character into a spy spot on somebody else's territory. That would be a blocked spot. Nobody can go in there until the spy is now expelled, which, yes, would take a resource die. But keep in mind that that resource die has to have a +4 in order to expel it. Last but not least is get land. Very similar to buying a part of your town, but you don't really have to like spend resources. Here's the resources. I'll just be like, all right, give me a resource, or give me a land tile. So I put it in my city, and all these have to be legal actions when you place them in there. So resource die stealing is a little interesting because you're actually giving somebody a dice plus a modifier in order to take a color dice of your choice. So if I want to do 2 actions, I'd have 2 blue actions, for example. I'd have to steal a dice from somebody. It's pretty much as simple as that sounds. If I want to take somebody's blue die and I have this red, I'll give them like, you know, all right, here, give me your blue dice, and it's mandatory. Now, what's pretty cool about this dual action right here is whatever row you choose, you're actually doing both with 1 die. So if I were to bid on a town, I'd also be able to produce. So if I use the 4 to buy like a shop, right, I'd also know that I can get the 2 resources. Because when a player drafts a resource die, they actually perform 2 actions with that resource die in here. Now, I'm not going to go over much more. I just want to give you like a general overview of what this game looks like and how it's played. And, you know, the graphics, of course, are really interesting. A lot of the game is just about like creating a bigger town, building resources, moving them to the shop, you know, giving people having people choose your shop in order to give them resources, and by giving them resources, you'll get more points on the board here. And as the game progresses, right, you're running through the level 1 tiles with the level 1 people. You'll start including level 2 buildings, or since you'll have your level 1, 2s, and 3s here, when the 1s run out, the 2s will start showing up, and the 3s will start showing up. So the game advances pretty slowly, but the pacing's not bad if you're looking for a very long game. Eventually you're going to have like this amazing town, and you're going to have all these characters in your town that will give you special abilities like destroying resources or something like that. And every turn, you know, every round you have a new action to come out to give you different builds of the duel system, which is kind of fun and a little different there. I forgot to talk about this here. When you are building, this is going to be rolled at the beginning of the round, and it tells you what side of the town you're allowed to build on. West, so anything has to be built on the west side, pretty much.
What I don't like is the dual action mechanic that's introduced to this game. I think it slows down the pacing early game, in my opinion. Forced actions early game make for a very dry and rehearsed moveset. Everyone's going to need to get land and produce early game. Everybody's going to need to get land and produce early game. But the dual actions are either going to stop us from taking 2 full actions or just giving us 1 action and just kind of adding the fluff of gameplay length when you don't necessarily need it. Yes, you can make 1 or both actions on your turn, but I just think that having 2 actions every turn just eliminates some of the length of the game. And I don't want to play a long game if I don't have to. And I don't necessarily find it necessary to play a long game unless I am experiencing something in the game that I feel is intuitive. Unless I feel something is convergent or just adding a new element to the game. Another issue I have is the rulebook is, in my opinion, pretty convoluted. Now, I'm a big fan of testing new mechanics as I read the book because I can't retain a lot of information at once. I literally have to visually and actively play the rulebook as I go. In this game, it's kind of hard to shift through the rulebook, if not shift around the rulebook, finding what I need to know in order to play the game, like the exact rule in this specific turn. I would have to be shuffling through pages until I find what I need. And maybe I'm expected to thoroughly read through this rule book, but personally, I like my first play to be a tutorial. I like to set the game up, begin playing, and read the rulebook as I go. By the time I get to the end of the rulebook, I expect to have understood the game, gotten down at least one round, and be able to restart and really start grasping the game's experience and gameplay. But what do I love? I love the theme and enjoy the gameplay concept a lot. Finally, a game that shows us the hard work everybody else puts into the worlds for our heroes that we usually play as. These NPCs that work so hard in these simulated worlds. I love that the artwork is reminiscent to classic gaming. Each piece created to immerse the player in this isometric town. Even the land cards have a depiction of land, trees and such, just to create more of an atmosphere for the game. And the center board is noticeably meaty of all the content in the game. You have all the heroes, all the buildings, and you have the victory point board next to it. And I have to give credit to the production value as well. Great solid cardboard and hero cards are top notch. I also really enjoy how the developer interacts with the dice. There's so many varieties to each dice, whether you're looking for the highest roll, the lowest roll, color of the roll. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. Maybe you need both. And I enjoy that because there's so much to do with these dice now. The game allows for versatility in strategy mid to late game. My final thoughts is you cut out some of the fluff in length and kind of organize the rulebook a little bit, and you'll have a pretty solid game because everything besides those two components are fantastic. The artwork, the isometric view, the theme of playing as someone who's not a hero for once is really neat. I mean, the game's really well structured, and if you play it mid to late game after you get past the slow monotonous growth of being early game, the game is really fun. So what do you think? This looks like something you want? This is definitely my first big game I've reviewed in a while. Let me know what you think.